Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Underneath podcast. I have here today a real great guest, somebody I've been itching to talk to in person. He goes by the handle Necktie Salvage on Twitter and on Instagram and other places. But his name is O.W. Root. And O.W., it is a real pleasure to have you here in the Underneath. I wonder if you could, well, I'll just say a quick thing. I found you and your work online after I had waged a quixotic war this summer against denim, and maybe we can get into the denim wars in a little bit. A lot of people I will know who follow me know that I've been waging this denim war thing. But at any rate, if you could tell us a little bit about your project and how it might tie into this theme of my show of getting to the underneath. So.
My focus is on style and the intersection of aesthetics and culture and style and what it really means, what it says to us, what it says to the world, what it says to others in our group. So often this is almost a forgotten domain. People have almost relegated style just to, in the way that we present ourselves, to not only just materialism, but almost suggesting that it doesn't even really matter. That, it's materialism, and it doesn't say anything deeper beyond just the monetary value of it. Now, it might work as a signal for some sort of monetary value, but there's definitely no deeper connection. And this has led to it's such an important domain in our lives and in the aesthetic that when you forget that, a lot falls away. And there's something that falls away in terms of your perception of yourself, in terms of dignity, and in terms of how you understand yourself to be. And it almost ends up having a hole there. And so my project is focused on not only the brass tacks. The brass tacks is great. I talk a lot about very specifics. I write about that. But there's a deeper, as you say, underneath. There is this deeper stream underneath all of this, and which it's far deeper than just the fabric, the material. It goes much deeper, the meaning. And that's my focus, is on that, specifically in the male realm.
Yeah, you hear the word style, you hear the word fashion, and I would especially say that in man space. I mean, I know this is not a manosphere type thing, but in man space, there's a real, and certainly in America, and maybe we can talk a little bit about the differences elsewhere, but in America, the word sort of man and style and fashion, there's an uncomfortable relationship, if not outright hostility. I mean, to what do you attribute that kind of hostility?
I mean, this is a really big question. I've talked about this a lot and written about this. There was something happened in which, if you cared about style, if you cared about the way you presented yourself, it was almost considered suspect, almost gay or something like this. So then
absolutely, it's considered fey. I think that's right. I think that's important to invoke here.
For sure. There's this stupid idea that gets out there where, if you care about style, if you care about presenting yourself with decency, there's something a little suspect there. You might be gay. So what do guys do? They run the exact opposite way.
Yeah.
They say, I'm going to do the opposite of that, and I'm going to be a total slob. And any suggestion that I might care might lead me to this or lead people to think this. So I want people to think the other. So I'm going to be a slob. And I mean, this idea that if you care about presenting yourself with just a sense of decency, I mean, we're talking about ironing your clothes, just making sure you look decent. That would be so foreign to our grandfather's generation, that is somehow a gay thing. That would be so obscene. Idea, I mean, people,
and of course, even that phrase, right? It's code, right? It's code for caring about something that's not manly. I mean, independent of like the sexuality question, it's code for you care about things that are ultimately not important. And so that's really where I want to sort of, at least this opening part, how to sort of focus in on the idea of it being important, right? In this idea that style is somehow some sort of added on thing, that you care about. I wonder if, how that meme started.
Well, think about this. Is art just some added on thing? No.
Right.
Is
Right.
culture just some added on thing? No. Is music just some added on thing? No. See, this is all connected because
Yeah.
you've seen men essentially shrink from those disciplines,
Yeah.
and they've essentially been, oh, they're just lightly on the surface. What really matters is money. What really matters is the economic reality. All this other stuff is just superfluous, and to care about it means it's sort of a feminine thing. Now, of course,
That's right.
those things that were categorized as superfluous are really the things that matter in life.
Yeah.
You can even see it
Right.
shrinking from religion as well. You've sort of seen men
Right.
sort of shrink from their role in religion. Oh, it's just this sort of superfluous thing. It's not. It's the whole heart and soul of everything. And so what we saw men essentially shrink from the most important things in life and culture, categorize them as superfluous, cede the territory, and now look what has happened.
Yeah, like there's something kind of deeply suspect about an affective reality. To care about it, and it's almost the sort of the linking of say fashion or style here as explicitly superficial.
For
And
sure.
what I'm drawn to you in your work is that you seem to have this certainly intuition, but even putting some meat on the bones, so to speak, that it, the way we project out into the world is not superficial. It's actually deeply meaningful, and it has something to do with our embodied reality. So how does that work? How does all of that work?
I mean, there's so many ways we can go to this. Let's go to the shallow. We'll go a few
Yeah.
levels. We'll keep going deeper.
Mhm.
The shallowest level. Do you feel better before or after you take a shower? After.
Right.
Do you feel better
Right.
before or after if you have clean clothes or dirty clothes? This is the most
Right.
shallow level because it's just surface. Obviously clean. Obviously after the shower. After if you look decent. Let's go
Yeah.
a little deeper. People, tribes, cultures, regions, everything have been reflecting who they are through their garments for ages.
Yeah.
I mean, where does tartan come from? Tartans have a very specific
Scots.
history and this very specific regions and all of this. This is not new. This is old. And so people represent who they are as a part of a group and their tribe and belongingness and how they look. That is essentially, it's similar to their flag. It's a flag that you're wearing on yourself.
Yeah.
Then we go even deeper. What do men's clothes and women's clothes in their differentiation reveal? They reflect the difference between the eternal forms of man and woman as created by God.
Right.
And different cultures around the world have different ways of reflecting those eternal different forms that lock up with their culture within their cultural sphere, but they reflect these two separate distinct forms. And so clothing is a reaffirmation within your culture of the two distinct created forms by God in creation. So these are all these levels, and there's also 100 other levels you could drill in between those. But this is it goes down and down and down from the everyday brass tacks, and also to personally who you are. What is your story as well? That's somewhere in there between the first and second level going down. Is that where are you going? Who are you? What do you want to say? What do you say to yourself when you see what you're wearing, when people see you? Who are you? Because that's what people see. If you read older books or older accounts or how people describe people describe their clothes often. He was wearing this. He appeared in this. I mean, this isn't some strange thing. It's like, no,
No, it's funny. I was on my run this morning, and I was thinking of exactly this. I just finished teaching the Canterbury Tales here. We're wrapping up the fall term right now, and I just gave my exam, and so Chaucer's on the brain. And of course, in the Middle Ages, the sumptuary laws were very tightly policed. It was a thing. So you were sort of projecting into the world, like at least on some base level, like who and what you are. Or where you were, as it were, and so that what is happening in the background of the Canterbury Tales is that in certain locales, a third of the population in some of these towns has been wiped out by the plague, right? And so there's all this sort of this potential for movement, right? But you still have this world in which a knight dresses a certain way, a prioress dresses a certain way, a merchant dresses a certain way, and so what's so funny is that the monk, for instance, and we can all conjure right now an image of a monk in our head, and it's going to involve a black robe and something like that. And so the description of the monk is not a description of a monk at all. It is a monk in name only, to use our phrase, you know. And what he's really describing is this man of the world with these brilliant, you know, supple brown boots and this incredible frock with fur-lined ermine on the sleeves, and his horse is, you know, filled with bells, and he's you know, driving around in the functional equivalent of a sports car. And then, of course, the credulous narrator says something to the effect of like, "Oh, he's the best monk I've ever seen in my life." And of course, you know, in other words, he's not a monk.
Yeah.
Right. So the idea here is I think a sound one, is that this sort of projection into the world has some sort of rootedness in what we are and where we are, and so yet we certainly, I mean, well, I take this a couple of different ways. I mean, how have we abandoned that sort of that what you seem to be arguing as a kind of necessary connection between how you dress and what you project?
I mean, this is the thing. When we're talking about this, we're talking about an object on the table, and it's an object that looks different from different directions. And so there's all these ways that we can describe it that are true, but are going to sound a little different in different ways, and they're true in different time frames. I think that if we're talking about very recently, I think that the digital world has a extreme accelerating impact on this, because, and we can talk, and we'll go a little bit back farther before that, but we're starting right in the here and now so we can really see it.
That's right. That's right.
You see in the digital world, it's really simple. You've got $10 to spend. If you're going to spend, if first you spend $1 on the digital and $9 on the physical world, all right, fine. But slowly, we've spent more and more money on the physical world. Soon enough, you're spending $8 on the physical world or on the digital world, virtual world, whatever, $2 on the physical world. And you start building up these grand, incredible places, these grand, incredible images of yourself, of everything in the virtual, while the physical completely falls apart. And we have this retreat away from reality, a retreat away from the actual world, the physical world, into the virtual. And the problem is that you're not going to be able to get rid of that physical world. And so you can build up that virtual world all you want, but you are stuck here in this physical, whether you like it or not. And what we've seen is that, as you can see, a direct correlation, and there's other direct correlations as well, as people have spent more time in the virtual world, whether it's video games, whether it's online, whether it's just anything, the physical starts to fall apart. We no longer care about the beautification of our surroundings. We no longer care about the beautification of ourselves in a way. And people say, "Oh yeah, but we're in like this vain time." Kind of not. It's like, I mean, there's obviously different peoples, different sort of substrates of society that have different sort of values.
Correct.
But broadly, what we've seen is that a total devaluation of the dignity of man in the physical space, and instead a sort of retreat into the virtual. And of course, you can't even act in the virtual. There's a lot of levels to this. You're only consuming. You're only letting the world wash onto you, the fake world wash onto you. You're not even actually acting. You're not even actually changing anything. You're not even participating in it. You might be, but it's still fake. So it's still just washing over you. And so there has been this acceleration as it's pulled apart. And you can even see work from home. Work from home accelerated that. A lot of people talk about how work from home accelerated this. Beyond that, you go earlier. There is a connection between there's this interesting connection between us having a ton of money. Not everybody. I mean, I don't have a ton of money, but as like a civilization.
But broadly speaking, even the poorest amongst us are actually materially not.
Exactly. There's this really interesting connection between the material world being opulent in a way and us looking worse. And in a certain sense, we're throwing all of our care, all of our value, all of our worth onto these objects that signal money. And they're not only just about comfort, And then we're almost dwarfed by them because we're obsessed with throwing the money at it. And then so we feel smaller, and then we can't even almost dance with the object in a sort of equal pairing because we look worse. And so it just keeps separating more and more and more. This is why you see someone in this massive, incredible house, incredible car that costs God knows how much, and they look like a total bum. Is that in a certain sense, they really are almost saying man is less than the object. And when we talk about our clothes, we're not worshiping objects because they actually are representing ourselves. They're on us. But there is this interesting sort of move where it's almost man is being dwarfed, but he is just worshiping his object, and it makes him seem even smaller and smaller. And there's this deep spiritual level, whether it's AI, whether it's computers, whether it's all this stuff, man is almost making himself smaller and smaller, and his image reflects that.
Yeah. So I don't know.
I know it's a lot.
No, that's great. It's great. I've been thinking in similar ways. There's a book I came across. What is it called? It's by this guy Hans Georg Mueller and Paul D'Ambrosio. It's called You and Your Profile, and it's a really interesting book. And he's a philosophy professor, I think, in Macau. But anyway, he's German. And he talks about that we live in what is called the age of profilicity and profilicity, right? And he says that it comes at the end, it is sort of rendered the age of authenticity irrelevant, and the age of authenticity actually rendered the age of sincerity irrelevant, right? So there's this sort of this cycle. And I would love to poke him around and sort of ask him some questions, but I'm struck by his notion of the profile, that we live in the age of the profile, because I'm a Gen Xer. I was born in '73, so I truly grew up. I had a fully undigital childhood, the way that we understand digital world now. Yeah. I got my first email account literally the month that I'm turning in my master's degree.
Wow.
My first cell phone I purchased, which was still a phone, I purchased about a year after I earned my master's degree. So I still have lots of memory of that, right? Of this pre-digital world.
Yeah.
And so in my world, authenticity was king. Now I can poke a ton of holes into what I thought was authentic versus what might really be authentic, but still, like, that
the spirit is there. It's about the presumptive spirit.
That's right.
It's nothing's gonna be perfect. You can always poke holes in everything. The presumptive spirit, thrust.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. But it is clear to me that we live in this sort of the age of the profile. And I got to be honest with you, W. I have really been loath to jump into this digital space, with podcasting and online stuff, because I think I harbor a kind of old school prejudice against the digital. Even though I like tech stuff, I'm not a Luddite, but I'm really deeply suspect of it, and I'm certainly suspect of this YouTube space, and so it's really kind of kept me from diving in. Now, of course, here I am, and I'm doing it. And in part, I have to say, inspired by the kind of work that you are doing, because what I see with your work is that you are attempting to draw our attention, all of us who live and move and have our being in the age of the profile. You are attempting to actually meet that irreality head on and be like, no, look, you live in the world. You are not meant to sort of spend your days and nights in athleisure. That there's something that you are not living into, and so how do you think that the age of or, as my kids will jokingly call it, the Grout Fit, the gray sweatshirt top and the gray sweatsuit bottom, and just talk about just giving up on life.
For sure. And when we say that, because this is something that I struggle with a lot when people hear me talk, and this is why I try really hard to always remind them that it's not about this. I'm not trying to hit people when they're down. I'm trying to say, this is actually impacting you, and you don't know yet. You might have an inkling somewhere, but we're all sometimes I say, it's an interesting thing. People don't think about the victims of liberalism very much. We think about the victims of a whole bunch of other of the totalitarian regimes, because they're obviously incredible victims of outward violence and atrocity. But there are victims of liberalism.
That's great. I love that. I think you're right. Keep going.
There's many. Good, There's so many. If you really want to go down we can really talk about millions of victims of liberalism. You know, how many people? And in many ways, we're all victims of liberalism in a way. Like, but some of us less more than others. And so when I'm talking about people who are struggling with this is why I never share a picture of a normal person and criticize it ever. If you notice, I'll never do that, because it's like that's not the point. Like, we're talking about something bigger. I want people we can have a better future. And so when we're talking about people being in a bad place, so we want them to be higher. I wanted to say, I got this out of the drawer because of what you're talking about being tech. I used to use this punked phone. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's from Switzerland, but it's a dumb phone. I used this for a long time, and then they kicked me off American networks. I don't think you can get on American networks anymore.
Oh, but that's great.
It's basically a decidedly dumb phone, and it has no internet. It's a T9 text. It's very nice because it's only black and white too. And so I understand. I brought that up because I understand what you're saying about this hesitancy in this profilification that you mentioned as well. I understand. I think that
because there are real pressures, right? I mean, in you know, I work at a prep school, you know, so I can see it. You know, I work with kids every day. And, you know, so I can go down that rabbit hole, but I want you to sort of talk about the pressures of, you know, you're not pointing fingers. This is not about, you know, slaying fools online, all my denim jokes aside. You know, you seem to be calling us, especially, you know, your focus is on men and men's fashion, calling us to sort of a dignity that you say, we victims of liberalism are maybe even not fully aware that we are.
Like let's think about that. What you mentioned with the gray sweatpants, gray sweatshirt,
the Grout Fit,
the Grout Fit. Think about how small. Think about how this makes the person small. You really feel, and think about the profile. So imagine that you have some sort of profile, you have some sort of image of not even yourself, but something out there. And think of its separation from the reality. Think of as it separates from the real, and think about how much that separates from the real. And I think that what you see is that it starts separating, and then it separates more. And unless you reel it back in, it just keeps separating. And it not only separates in the presentation that you're putting forward, actually out into the digital world, but also separates in terms of who you even start to think of who you are. You almost feel like you're lying. And you're almost like this. And that's why when you see the athletes, when you see the sweatshirt, in all of this is it does make people feel smaller. It does also rob culture as well. You know, there's no cultural signal to the clothing at all. There's nothing natural. I mean, if you really want to get really esoteric with it, if you really want to get really into it, so cotton and wool. What does cotton come from? It comes from the earth. Where is man created from? In Breshit, in Genesis.
That's right.
On the earth. And what is Adam related to? Adamah. You know, I mean, there's all these connections. There is this like earth connection. This is organic connection. The synthetic athleisure that is not connected to the earth, unnatural colors. It represents a total falling into the Borg. It represents a total just dehumanization. We say here dehumanization a lot, but this is almost a form of dehumanization. And you see what I'm saying?
Oh, no, I do. You know, and I was going to jump in. You know, there seems to be always this sort of this tension, you know, between, you know, whatever earth and sky, or, you know, you could say, you know, we would, in our modern idiom, we would say like organic versus, you know, fake or fabricated. But I think what really, you know, what really is at root here is, you know, you have sort of pulls toward managerialism and pulls toward the earth, like these sort of these two things, and most of us live in some kind of compromise between those two spaces, and that's okay. I think that you can get a little bit overboard with the fear of the machine. Although I think we probably should collectively be much more concerned about the machine,
Sure.
broadly speaking, and certainly the digital machine, even more so. But
not all machines are equal. Not all machines are the same.
Right.
It's like,
and I was talking, in class the other day about, machines that extend basic physical competency versus machines that take over for agency and competency. Sort of there's a rough measure of that.
Absolutely.
And so I know it's hard to get sort of too high res about this, but I think we basically know what we're talking about, right? So you talk about cotton or wool or these things that are like farmed from the sort of the close to the natural world versus the kind of this synthetic thing that we live and move in now. So how again, people might accuse us of being sort of like head in the clouds, sort of so what is it about fibers and that remind us of something essential? Maybe that's where I want to get at.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, because people will say, oh, you're heading in the clouds, or this is too esoteric to this. No, we'll go right down. We can go brass tacks every day, what we wear, what you wear every day. These traditional clothes, let's talk about the heat, for example. Seersucker, linen.
Right. I'm from the South, so I love the seersucker. Yeah.
You know this. Yeah. Seersucker, linen, thin fabrics, very thin, breezy cotton. Those aren't today in our climate control. Going back to the machine, we have a climate control environment. We can have our house be 60 degrees if you want in July, whatever.
Yeah.
We almost, some of these materials have become just a fashion statement or something like this. No, they're not. That is not where they came from. These came from a very practical standpoint. And there's a reason why these fabrics are made the way they're made, for the location that they're from, for who was using them. It was to keep cool. It was out in the heat. It was farming. And so there's a real practicality to these organic, to these true, to these real historical fabrics that then have a place in history and culture as well. And not only is it about just the history and the culture and the appearance, but they actually work better than what most men wear. When I see most men, it's totally common to see in the summer, in June and July, a guy wearing blue jeans, a t-shirt, and tennis shoes. I mean, I'll see that all the time in the summer. And I could be wearing pretty thin chinos, boat shoes with no socks, a thinner sort of broadcloth button down, and a seersucker sport coat, and I would be cooler than him. I absolutely, without a doubt. Those jeans are so, and jean is even. Let's not even talk about jeans. Let's talk about synthetic sweatpants. Because even jean at least has some sort of natural thing. But a synthetic sweatpants. What I'm getting at here is that often these pieces actually have a real practical function. And so not only do they have a practical function in the warmth or in the cold, but they also feel better as well. When you wear a cotton OCBD, Oxford cloth button down, a cotton Oxford cloth button down that is 5 years old, 6 years old, is so much more comfortable than anything that you're buying that is synthetic. Or, I mean, it's actually more comfortable. It's actually more practical. It actually takes a beating and looks better because of it. There's something, why do we see a street in Italy or in Southern Europe so often, or in France as well? It's been maintained, but there's problems with it. There's life showing, but it's old. We like that. We like the signs of maintenance. The signs of maintenance, if there's something vital about it. Japanese have a word for this as well. Everybody always talks about it. I don't know the exact Japanese word because I'm not a Japanese speaker, but they have a word for this as well. But it's the beauty in the maintenance of something.
And I love it. Yeah, if you've seen those ceramic pieces where they will take that, it's gorgeous. Yeah, no,
it's gorgeous. But I don't know the word.
But OW, I'm like that. Like that's a metaphysic, right? Like that is a spirit that you talk about. People love things that are maintained. I mean, yet we live in, throwaway culture. We live in fast fashion culture. We live in, get rid of it, get to the new thing, get to the new thing, get to the new thing. So it's this sort of cult of novelty,
Yep.
The cult of throwaway. So so even in that, you are participating
Yeah.
in a kind of pattern or a spirit that is operating in you and on you in ways that you're unaware of.
Exactly. And it's like a snowball. These things are like
Yeah.
snowballs. Once you get going in one direction, you kind of just keep going unless you can somehow switch paths. And it's like once you get down one of these paths, it can be hard to switch. But once you understand and once you get to this more holistic place, this more organic place, this more real place, and because we're trying to get back to the brass tacks, I talk a lot about, this is not related to the fabrics, but it's just related to brass tacks about clothing, the anti-slim fit. A shirt that I don't wear any slim fit shirts. If you look at this, I've got lots of room here. This is so much more comfortable. This is so much more comfortable than some tight shirt. If you look at what's so commonly found in today, if somebody's going to look nice, you'll see a tight fit shirt here. It'll be really tight, and then the collar will be open. And there's this really interesting thing where it's actually uncomfortable. Someone might think that my collar is uncomfortable, but it's not because it fits, right?
And no, like I'm not. I put the tie on this morning, and I honestly haven't thought about it.
No,
since you just brought up the collar, So.
Yeah, it fits right. And so where does the real benefit come? Here, the ability to move. This is where you want to feel it. You don't want to feel constricted, restrained. And so this is a real brass tacks. We're trying to get to the brass tacks. We're trying to get to the day in, day out. When you wear pants that allow you to move and to act. When you wear a shirt that allows your arms to move, that you're not restricted. And what does that say also? Because we keep getting back to the meaning, but it's tied up directly to the act. What does it mean about man being able to act? What does it mean about man being able to actually move, to be actually exist in the world? I post photos a lot of times of guys, whether they're on a drafting board, whether they're building something, whatever, their clothes are not tight. They're moving, they're acting in the world, even if it's just a pencil. What does it say that you have this restriction where then if man wants to look nice, he's like a mannequin. He has to stand like this.
Right.
What does that even say? It's not functional. It's not practical. It's not clothes for everyday life. And this, there's so many layers to this. Like I said, there's 100 truths to this that are all true, but just describe a different side of it. And you're just stewing around in it at the different levels. But they all interface together.
So I wonder what you thought about, I remember reading, like everybody else on the planet, the Steve Jobs biography. I think is it Isaacson? I think it was. Anyway, the one that everybody read when he died. And in the wake of that, they made a lot of the fact that, Steve Jobs, the last, 15, 20 years of his life, wore, blue jeans, a black sort of mock turtleneck, and maybe not even shoes. Anyway, depending upon the day, whatever. But basically, he had sort of given up on making any kind of morning decisions because he contended that, this was sort of would contribute to his decision fatigue, and because he needed to be thinking about whatever it was for the company, that he sort of defaulted to this thing. Now, I don't have a problem with a uniform per se. But I would just wonder what you think, like how, what kind of an effect does a Steve Jobs, the sort of the myth of a Steve Jobs, have upon men and our sense of, dressing into the world?
Right. I mean, first and foremost, I would say if any guy is taking that as a playbook, I would first say you're not Steve Jobs, most likely.
Right.
Most likely you're not Steve Jobs. And most likely, I don't think that 15 minutes ironing your shirt in the morning is going to break your brain for your decisions for brass tacks throughout the day.
Yep.
And so just, again, because we're so easy to get high, just staying low. You're not Steve Jobs. And even if you are Steve Jobs, 15 minutes, it's not really that much decision. You've got, I can simplify it for you. Khaki chino, blue, white, yellow, pink, OCBD, navy, and some other sort of sweater. It's not that complex. Brown loafers and camp mocks. Not a big deal. It's not going to break your brain, trust me. So I actually kind of think that even argument is a bunch of I don't know. I think it's kind of lame.
It's bullshit. I mean, let's be blunt. Yeah, it's bullshit.
It's kind of lame because if you want to have a uniform, we all know what the uniform is in sort of Ivy prep. It's chinos, navy blazer, OCBD. This is the uniform. So if you want a uniform, okay, you're right. Uniforms are fine. The prisoners have a uniform as well. Military has a uniform as well. They have a dress uniform. So is a prisoner's uniform more dignified than sort of dress uniform from military? Obviously not. And so if I don't really believe in this sort of, if you want to have a uniform for society, yeah, let's have a dignified uniform. If you want to have a uniform, let's not have
we wind up having default uniforms, right? I mean, I think that what I
what was the mid-century? The mid-century had a uniform for men as well. We know what it was. It was basically made in Brooks Brothers image, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. No, I was thinking about in just sort of mental prep for talking with UW, and I was thinking like, well, where does like mine come from? And I sort of have these sort of iconic images that'll pop into my head, and I love, I am in fact a big fan of, like you, mid-century, 50s into the early 60s, sort of prep style, right? But I think of Sean Connery and Dr. No, like that, like that's just a beautiful gray suit, simple white tie, a simple white shirt, black tie, whatever, it's just very nice. But it's just, you think about those things as being just incredibly just dignified, right? You didn't have to question, like what he was. Anyway, so my point is that we tend, in the absence of thinking through these things for ourselves personally, we will default to a kind of uniform for whatever reason, right? So I teach kids, as you know, and so it's a private school, and we don't have a uniform, like a specific one that everybody wears, but we have guidelines, right? And so, for instance, right now, the boys have to wear, pants, chinos, shirt, tie, and a blazer, and they have to wear, closed-toed leather shoes, and that's roughly from, I don't know, sorry, I think somebody's cutting the grass outside. Classic. Sorry, people. It is what it is. So anyway, and that's roughly from, I think, Columbus Day through whatever, Easter, something like that. And then they can wear like a polo shirt, and they can wear leather, sandals, that kind of stuff with the chinos. But anyway, but what's always fascinating is that at a certain point, this is like, I want to say 3-4 weeks into the school year, it's our first dress down day, right? And as I joke with the kids, this is branding day. Like, this is the day in which you can sort of show out. And so I always have this, and I can make it coincide with a couple of things we're doing in class. But and it is so funny, especially with my freshmen and sophomores. Like, it's so funny. Like, they've never actually considered that what they chose to do on dress down day is an expression of some deeper reality, right? And of course, like, and so this is 2023, and so there's always a kid. I can bank on it. There's always a kid that's going to show up with a pair of black Chucks, a pair of sort of straight Levi's, and a Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon t-shirt. Like, I can guarantee it every time. And I love it, and I like Pink Floyd, and whatever. This is fun stuff. But it's like, what is that kid projecting? And they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, what? So I love the idea in that kind of day. It's such a clear illustration of you consciously or unconsciously project something into the world.
That's exactly right. You, whether you like it or not, you are representing something in how you dress. You really are, whether you like it or not, whether you're intending to or not, whether you're aware of it, whether you intend to, whether you like it or not, you are. And whether it was the most intentional day, like these kids, this is their most intentional day. This is it. Right. Whether it's the most intentional or the most unintentional, you are projecting something. You are.
And then they'll raise their hand like, Mr. Zeldon, like, I'm just the kind of guy who likes to wear like just sweats. Like, oh, you are. So this is like neutral. You just think you're neutral. Like, so you and like you and like the 70% in the middle have decided that you're all just magically going to look the same.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Or you're magically all going to have the same, Lululemon outfit, girls. Like what is this? Just magic?
Right.
Total coincidence.
Yeah. And question, why exactly is that Lululemon better than the one that's like $4?
Yeah.
Oh, because there's this whole like level that it's really just about like a monetary signal underneath it as well. And it's just like turning into a casino. Oh,
that's right.
Forgot about that part.
That's
you
right.
know, I mean,
That's
this is, yeah, I mean, the casinofication aspect of it.
Yeah.
In the
I love this. This is great.
I mean, I talk about Casino America sometimes because that's kind of, it's best to understand that like you live in the casino and you're not going to win. The house is going to win. So you can kind of leave.
Yeah.
You're not going to win. You cannot win. Even if you think you're winning for a long time, you will lose at the end. So if you can somehow remove yourself from the casino spiritually or disentangle your soul from that, that's your best option, you know?
Well,
and so,
and look, in OW, like that's just so, I mean, it can drill down to the core there, because in the end we're dead. Right. I mean,
exactly.
So therefore, you know, how do you comport yourself if it's true that in the end we're all dead?
It's like I don't remember who said it or who says it or I've read it, whatever, but it's like you're dead. Now what do you do? Just assume you're already dead. What are you doing? Like, you're already dead. Now what are you doing? Like, and that is a way to reframe about what really matters. It's a way to reframe and bring yourself out of this stuff and out of all this noise. And so much of it is the noise. And not only is that, you know, we've been talking about how it represents something to the world and all of this, but what does it mean to you to dress decently? You know, I say, I mean, it's a real point of sanity in a chaotic world. Part of when I really started getting into this was when I realized that the correlation between tougher times generally and people dressing more decently was a feature, not a bug. And when I started to sort of realize that, when I started to realize that, then it started to fall into place. A lot of things.
Okay, for our audience, can you break down the feature, not a bug insight that you had? Because I love this. I think this is really good.
Feature, not a bug means it's like an intended thing. That's part of the reason. That's part of the thing. It's not a meaning.
It's not broken. It's working.
It's not. It's not broken. It's working. It rains in the spring. That's a feature, not a bug.
That's right.
It's supposed to rain in the spring, so then the crops and everything. I'm not a farmer, but this is how it's supposed to work. Yep. So it's a feature. Those things. It's not an accident that when times were tougher, when times in the past, we believe it or not, we were not all wealthy and complete happiness all of our lives, with a need for some sort of order and dignity, in representation of dignity in yourself, in who you are and what you wear. Because to speak in just really simple terms, the world is beating you down so hard and you might die like that. And there's really not that much that's saying, guess what? You're great. You are so awesome. Yeah, there's really not much that's making your life really easy. And so there's obviously a connection with religion here too, as well, as things have gotten. So, you know, you think you're God because you have so much, and you think that you're dead, you don't need religion. It's all wrapped up together. You know, it's just one pillar of all of this. But that's what I mean when it says it's feature, not a bug, is that there's a reason why people would dress with a greater sense of dignity when times were tougher. And when whenever I orient my ideas, I orient them from the worst possible scenario, that things are tough, times are difficult, you're sick, your life, things are not going well. Your clothes aren't going to solve all your problems, but they can either help or hurt. And if you are having a real tough time, is it better to have a clean house or a messy house? Would you rather see a bunch of dirty dishes in the sink or fewer? We've all been there. We all know this. This is really common stuff.
Right.
But somehow we've forgotten that because of the virtual world, because of the digital world. We've shrinked back to it. So we forget this. We forget these common things that are so known. We know it deep in our heart because it's so obvious.
That's interesting to me. I watch my kids play video games from time to time. And this is not something that was true when I played video games back in the day. The only thing that I could do back in the day was I could choose whether or not to be, I think it was in second Mario Brothers or maybe in the third Mario Brothers, that I could choose to be Luigi or Mario or Princess Peach or what have you, right? And but my kids will spend a significant chunk of time tricking out their avatar. you know, so that, so like they'll like, there's this one game that they play, and they haven't played it the last year or so, but they used to play. It's called Splatoon, and or like Fortnite. Fortnite's a perfect example, right? So Fortnite, there's a whole panoply of options of characters that you can choose, and then you can choose, what kind of pants they wear, what kind of shirt they wear, what kind of backpack they wear, what kind of headgear they have, what kind of shoes. I mean, so it's a fascinating thing, and I'm sitting there watching my kids, rifle through all these options, and you can, like, if you pay extra money, you can get this, open up this one, and it's a brilliant revenue model, if you're interested. But what strikes me is that there's even in the video, even in this avatar world, this profile world, they know that it kind of matters. So like, I want to kick everybody's butt in Fortnite looking like this.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What an incredible insight. Yeah, what an incredible insight. Because it isn't just making an online sort of marketing thing look good. It's actually a character. It's actually It's actually who you're playing as.
It's me. It's me.
It's you. Yeah. It is the extension of you. And that is a fascinating observation.
Yeah, so even in this sort of this digital space, which shreds all this stuff up, there's still this sort of these remnants that now what I would want to argue is that we should understand that how we represent it, represent into the world is more important than what your avatar looks like in Fortnite or Splatoon or what have you.
Absolutely. And I think also to get in with that, I think that because we're talking about digital, we're talking about virtual, we're talking about the interface, we're talking about the relationship between the two. I think that part of the reason why fit posts as something that this is what you're wearing, part of the reason why they're so important is because it allows us to a reminder of the actual. Because if you just remove into the digital and there's no fit post, there's no representation of yourself, honest representation of yourself and who you are in a certain sense, that helps. It can pull away. The digital can pull away. So fit posts help anchor the real. It helps bring us back to the real. And for a lot of guys who are just getting into this or starting to think about this, fit posts are so important because it not only shows, okay, there are actual other real people out there who are doing this. All I see is a sea of slop, but I'm actually able to see someone else making an effort that can inspire me. And it's real. There are bumps and bruises. There are wrinkles, and wrinkles are beautiful. It is actual. It is true. It isn't just the perfect. Go on.
No, it's just so true. I remember, as a kid, a young man, I should say, and ironing my shirts, for work, and and it's like I would wait, and I was in the South, so sweat happens and right away, anyway. But I remember, like waiting until the last minute to throw that shirt on, to throw that tie on, because like I didn't want to look like and you know what it's like, you're in a race against time. So by the end of the day, like you're fully wrinkled. But even that, like there's a realness to all of that.
There's a beauty to the wrinkle. The wrinkle is beautiful. The wrinkle is life, and non-wrinkle, non-iron, anti-wrinkle stuff is anti-life. The beautiful, there's a sign of, because this is the thing. You can tell when you've ironed a shirt and it's been wrinkled here, really wrinkled here from going like this. You can tell the wrinkles of life. In that you can tell from the kids that you were holding, if you have toddlers or something like this, you can tell.
I used to have on my blazer, this one, I don't know, might still have like ketchup stains, on this one, as you put the child up on your,
And there's, something that is also really hard for us to get into is that those things are a part of life. They're a natural part of life. They're a sign of life. If you want to keep your wardrobe perfect, you will not be living.
That's right.
You can either live or be a mannequin. Which is it?
That's right. Yeah.
You can either do one or the other. And so accepting that, saying, I want to go outside, I'm wearing chinos, and I'm going to lay in the grass, play in the grass with my kids. It doesn't matter if I get grass stains, they'll come out later. I'll deal with it.
Yeah.
So something happens. Big deal.
Well, where did you get your, just getting personal here for a second, where did you get your sense of style? Like, what was the genesis of this for you?
I first started getting into style when I was in high school. And the
Mhm.
first style, and I was in high school in the early 2000s, 2001,
Okay.
2005.
Yep. Okay.
So this was right in that sort of neo-prep era. This is
Yep.
right when really extreme over the top neo-preppies.
Yeah. I used to
Excuse
call it
me.
obnoxiously preppy. Yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Totally over the top, obscene. I have some photos of myself from high school that are so beyond the pale. They're just
Oh, that's so great.
ridiculous. But
Oh, that's
so
so great.
they were totally in that realm, that sort of preppy realm, that neo-preppy realm.
Yep.
And I one time I uploaded a picture to Twitter, a picture of Abercrombie Fierce, that cologne, and said, "Can you smell
Love
this
it.
image?"
Oh,
And it's
yes,
like,
yes,
"Can you
yes.
smell this image?" That's like a real sign.
Yeah, in
And
my
so,
age, in my era, which I'm about a decade removed from
yeah,
you, in my era it was Polo cologne. Oh,
polo
I
cologne.
can,
Yeah.
yeah, I could still smell that.
You can
Oh
smell it.
my
See the
God.
picture, and you can smell it.
Yep,
Um,
yep, yep.
so I first started getting into style. That was really the first sort of. I said, "Okay, I'm going to develop my personal style," and
Yeah,
I
right,
like style.
exactly.
I like style,
Yeah,
and then I
yeah.
weaved in a whole bunch of different directions. I was,
Mhm.
I went to Europe when I was in the summers when I was a kid,
Oh,
and
nice. Where?
actually, I went on these tours, and so I
Yeah, okay.
Germany, France,
Right, okay,
Netherlands,
right, yeah,
Denmark,
okay.
Italy, all
Yeah,
over.
did it. All
Um,
right, yeah, I got you.
yeah, and so that was actually kind of a real changing thing for me because I realized, oh, you actually can care about
Yeah,
clothing,
I had
and
a
it's not
similar
in the brand.
experience.
Okay,
Yeah,
so you
I went
understand.
to I studied in Rome for a
Mhm.
semester,
Okay.
and that was a real eye opener.
Uh-huh.
You know,
You realize
and
you're
I
not
remember
crazy.
my and I remember my teacher. We did a whole thing on like sprezzatura and
Oh, yeah,
whatever.
for
Just
sure.
like being Italian is like being out in the piazza, and
Yeah,
that
yeah,
whole thing, and
yeah.
really opened me up to. It's funny. I came back to a kind of preppy,
Mhm.
Ivy prep that you talk
Mhm.
about, but with a sort of a sense of the
For
style
sure.
part of it.
Same thing for me. I incorporate a lot of sprezzatura stuff, a lot of the
Yep,
thinner blade longer than the fatter blade,
yep,
all sorts of
yep,
stuff in my
yep,
stuff as well. I love that. Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, going to Europe sort of just made me realize, okay, it's actually not I'm not the crazy one. It's actually not so
right,
weird to
right,
care about this. And then I was always into it a little more. Like I said, I went in different directions, more weird style.
yeah,
When I lived overseas, I also dressed more in that sort of style to sort of blend in a little bit. But
yep,
then
yep,
when I really started getting into the deeper elements of this was when I got older and started having kids. When I started
yeah,
having kids, and I started to really get deeper into, well, what do clothes mean really? What
yeah.
are the values that you're reflecting, and what do
Mhm.
you want your because once you start having kids, you stop thinking only vertically, but you're thinking
Yeah,
horizontally in terms of
that's
time.
right.
And
That's
so
right.
that
That's
was
right.
a real clarifying thing, which started me to really think about this in a deeper way rather than just fabric.
Yeah. Yeah. My brother got really into, this was in like the late 80s, right? So like 88, 89, 90, right around there. He was in a fraternity
Mhm.
and he and his big brothers were like really into fashion. It was preppy
Mhm.
fashion, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah.
And Mark, my brother, was just like, he's like, he was very funny. Like in retrospect, it's absolutely hilarious. But he was like, you should wear cotton, and you should wear a collared shirt whenever you can. And it was just all these rules, and of
Yeah.
course, I in retrospect, I look back and I was like, oh, I kind of like I love the idea of rules, or like, and really what I'm is a sort of a field of action, the
Mhm.
rules as
Mhm.
a kind of
Yep.
field of action, and he even to this day he's like he's a I don't want to call him a clothes horse exactly, but
But he's
he's
into
like
it.
he's into it,
Yeah.
and he wears a hat and
Okay.
and the whole thing. He works in Capitol Hill, so he can kind of get that
Oh,
there's that whole element of that
right.
there,
Yeah, for sure.
that you
He
could
can
kind of
go
do
as
it.
formal as he wants. He can go as formal
That's
as he
right.
wants, intentionally as he
Yeah,
wants. There's no
yeah.
ceiling for him, really.
Right. Whereas for me, I'm a teacher, so
Yeah.
I'm basically like a half step,
Mhm.
above,
Mhm.
my prep kids. I don't own a suit. I wear a blazer every day, and I wear chinos every day. It's what I am.
Eh,
It would be really weird for me to walk
yeah,
in, with a full on suit, beyond a special occasion.
and this gets to a real it's not esoteric. It's just
Mhm.
brass tacks. every guy is not the same. You know, I write about style, I talk about style, I do style advising for guys and help them develop their personal style. Every guy is not the same. Every guy doesn't have the same life. You like you said, wearing a suit every day it's not what you would do. It's just inappropriate. It doesn't suit your life. I don't wear a suit every day either. I never wear suits because it doesn't suit my life either. We all, and gets to the deeper point though about dignity. There are different men in different places in life with different jobs, different occupations, different circumstances, but they can all dress it with a sense of dignity that reaffirms them as men. And modern men in this style is what I would say, part of the reason why I talk about the style so much is that I can't think of a single better style that more authentically represents a higher American modernity for man.
I think that's right.
There just isn't another option. You might complain about it, but you can't provide me another option. This is the option that is historically resonant, culturally resonant, not a LARP that does exist today and is functional in modern as well.
See, now I feel like you're baiting me because you invoked the word LARP, and I've been tweeting and thinking a lot about this idea because
I saw it from yours. I saw it, and you're right.
Yeah, you know, it's like, and it's funny. This is one of the things that the postmodernists really understand. What I disagree, where I part ways with our postmodernist friends is that they just see LOL, nothing matters. Whereas for me, you know, quite the contrary. It actually it's a way of grounding us into an ontology and a metaphysics ultimately. So I was thinking in these terms. I remember it must have been last year, maybe the year before, but I was talking about a poem or something in class, and the poem or the short story, the line was, you know, dressing in your Sunday best. And none of my kids knew what the hell that was. Not a one of them. They're like, I'm just getting crickets. Sunday best, like, what are you talking about? Right. And of course it's shorthand, right? Because
it implies church. It implies a certain religiosity.
Right. Because whether you go to church on Saturday or Sunday, everybody of a certain generation knew exactly what you meant when you said put on your Sunday finest, right? And so even, you know, the guy who went to work every day with a blue collar, you know, and work boots and whatnot, showed up on Sunday in a basic suit. The guy who went to the office building and litigated things in the courtroom, who showed up in a suit, you know, Monday through Friday, showed up on Sunday or Saturday in a suit. Right. And there was something about the dignity of the proceeding dictated that you show up appropriately attired. Right. And it was fascinating to me. And I wonder, you know, if you could draw anything out of that. Is the draining of collective spiritual work that we used to call religion, you know, is a draining of that space a cause or an indicator, I wonder?
I think it's these things. It's like a cycle where you can't tell where it starts.
Yeah.
It just keeps going. It keeps going. And for a lot of guys who start dressing decently now, after not, they do start on Sundays.
That's funny.
They start because they'll start on Sundays because that's where there's like this remnant. There's a remnant of this. That's where they start often. It's not on Mondays. It's not on Fridays. It's not on Saturdays. They start wearing their Sundays best. And so it is this, all of this stuff is, you know, a lot of people who follow my work, in a certain sense, so I always say I'm not talking about formality, but for many of it's who are you talking to? I don't dress formally compared to the suiting guys, but compared to the guy on the street, I do dress formally. So it's like these colloquial terms, it's hard, you know, it means different things to different people. But religion, in a certain sense, is formal because it's almost a hierarchy. God is above you, and you are worshiping and you are praying. And there is a certain sense of, in some religion is more formal than others. Some rites and rituals are more formal than others. But there is, when you really compare it to like a totally egalitarian, just slop society, there's a certain formality to religion. And it's not surprising that these things go together. A sort of attempt at dignity, attempt at formality, attempt at respect, attempt at sort of hierarchy, longing for that spiritually in our heart and our soul, and then also representing it physically in our clothing as well. And it's not surprising that those things fall apart together and they fall away together and they're rediscovered together.
Yeah, that's what I'm sensing. I like that. I do think that there's some kind of coterminous reality there,
Yeah, for sure.
that one seems to invoke the other, almost a kind of like small L liturgical invocation or something,
Yeah, yes, and we're getting into so many interesting things because there is a certain sort of thrust and sort of stance, a gestalt to this style, which is decidedly modern and decidedly American as well.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
there's a sort of something that I think is interesting. I think it's from a Puritan poem or something, decorum of imperfection. There is a certain sort of decorum of imperfection with this style as well. The wrinkle, the
Yeah,
non-ostentatiousness of it. Why is it that the OCBD looks more beautiful with the phrase?
yeah,
There is
yeah, that's
this
true.
humbling humility, sort of decorum of imperfection to this that is really pretty. This is pretty high level stuff. I don't think that
Yep.
people see this on the surface, not necessarily, but it animates a lot of this, and it is a strain through that, and it gets to what is good taste as well.
Mhm,
It's
mhm.
this, like, we can talk about this so much. It's really murky. It's very interesting, but it's related to this religiousness in a way.
Yeah, I ultimately think you're right. I mean, and I in my hopeful days, I feel like we're on the verge. There's something being forced by our collective participation in the digital demands of
Mhm.
contemporary life, right? I think something is being forced in all of this that we might be able to finally have eyes to see and ears to hear a deeper reality, because the digital is just straining us, is pulling us apart. I feel that, that it's impossible to live in the demands of the digital, and so that maybe more people will, as you say, you know what, this Sunday I'm gonna throw on a tie,
Mhm.
when I go to church, or something like that, and I you know and again, I just don't want to stress. Okay, I can hear all my critics right now. It's like, well, you should just come as you are, and I you know, I has I'm hemming and hawing here. I am hesitant to merely dismiss that,
Yeah,
right?
for sure,
But
for
I
sure.
also want to say that, yeah, but like sometimes you should come as you should. You know.
That's a really good way to put it. Yes, I'm not dismissing come as you are, but sometimes you should come as you should. It's the difference between is and ought. It
Yeah, yeah,
is
I think
it is
so.
about directionality, and
Mhm,
I do think that, again, this is it's a very subtle layer that I'm talking about with
mhm,
this. What is the meaning of when we look at this style, the imperfections that are beautiful, this
mhm,
decorum of imperfection? What makes this American? What makes this American modern?
mhm, mhm,
And I'm thinking about it as this middle place between those. Come
mhm.
as you are, just come as
Yeah,
you
yeah,
should. It is this
right,
facilitation. It is this aspect of decency, but decency isn't always grand pomp.
right. That's right.
There is
Pretentiousness or what
it
have you.
isn't. It's not
Mhm,
ostentatious. The
mhm.
knit tie, the dark knit tie is the opposite of ostentatious.
Yeah,
Yet this style isn't uh, it isn't dour either. We have color. That's
yeah,
actually a
yeah,
part of our tradition.
yeah,
There, as
yeah.
with all things, this is, I think, the problem with we're getting to the digital 140 characters, 180, whatever it is, 5
Mhm,
million
mhm,
characters, I don't know, whatever,
mhm.
is that most of the ideas that are worth anything are too complicated to explain in 30 seconds. And
Sure.
there are things that go like this together and they work together. And even if they seem like they're a little friction, there isn't. There's friction here at one level, but there isn't. And so what you're saying, come as you are, come as you ought to, come as you should, directionality, there, these are all bouncing off each other. And they seem like they're in friction, but then they're not. And then they resolve, and it's almost musical. There's almost a music to it, tension release. And I think that sometimes this gets lost because in our time, everything's simplified down into just something that's not really getting anything meaningful, you know?
Yeah. And I think, I guess where I come down on it, to sort of like land the plane here, I think it's important for people to almost like to be told, like, it's okay. Like, it's okay to not feel like you have to dress down every day.
Yeah, for sure.
And that, and again, we're talking, I guess now I'm going to bring us back specifically, sort of talking, to men, or, with men, that again, I'm going to come across as a total Neanderthal here, but like, caring about, your style is not gay. Right.
No, but
And again,
that needs to be said.
I'm
That's the
using the
main,
idiom. I'm using the idiom
for
here, but
sure,
it's like,
for sure.
it's not. In fact, it really kind of matters. And your decisions, I think, of how you are going to live in the world, those decisions are consequential, and not only for your own sense of dignity, but ultimately to the dignity of those that we live with and work with and worship with and break bread with, right? I mean, it really, it brings something that I see. I don't know, what you think of Adobe, but I see as like really necessary, and we're long overdue, it seems to me,
For sure.
for a
Absolutely.
rejuvenation of this.
Think about a funeral. Let's take it to the most
Right.
extreme. Sometimes when you take it to the most extreme level, it helps clarify just the direction. Is
Love
it
it.
better to show up?
Right.
I'm not even going extreme here. Just, is it better to show up with an iron shirt that has a collar, pants, and some other shoes, or in a hoodie that has a joke on it, and or a t-shirt, or a pair of jeans, or flip-flops? We know who appreciates that. Is it the person who's passed away? Not necessarily, but yet there's a very interesting thing into all this that you can talk about as
Actually,
well.
we
I mean,
could.
we can't even go into this, because it's so deep. We'll be here for hours. But it is about this occasion. Someone's passed away. It is about respect. It is about, why do they say paying your respects?
That's right. I love that phrase. It's exactly right, because it's a sacrifice of respect.
Yes, yes. And so it gets into manners, respect, sacrifice of respect. What is all this? And the cult of the hyper individuals who has to wear whatever they want.
You're getting at the enemy, right? You're getting, a funeral is, I think, a perfect example, because it is a remaining sort of gathering, right, in which we mark something substantial has happened, right?
Yes.
And therefore, yes, go. Period. Full stop. If you all you've got is a pair of shorts and flip flops with a tee, go. I don't care. Just go. Right.
For sure.
But understand too that there is so much to paying your respects, that's a great phrase, right? Paying your respects, because there's an intuitive sense that to cheapen this event is offensive, right? Like, to offend, like at sort of its most sort of core sense of that. Like, to offend is like, we intuitively understand that we're actually offending God in some kind of real way.
And we're offending even that person who's passed away, because we can't even get into it because it's so deep right now. But there is this, it is an offense to do that. And like you said, go. But some of the difficulty with what we're working through here is that so much of this manners, decency and dress, offense, all of this, it goes unwritten and unspoken, because to speak it is vulgar in a certain sense.
That's right. Right. Because who are we supposed to learn this from, OW? We were supposed to learn this from our dads, and our dads were supposed to have learned it from their dads. And like, that's what I'm talking about. This interruption of of the signal.
Exactly. And that stopped. You're right. So the signal stops. And so then the it was really just effervescent, because it's taught at one point in time, but then it's this effervescent sort of thing that exists that to really even talk about is almost vulgar, because you don't want to explain it, because it should just be assumed. But then once it stopped, the effervescency is sort of drifted away and melted away.
Yeah.
So now the only way to bring it back is to talk about it. And it's to try to move things in a better direction.
Yeah. And you know, the word that it keeps popping into my head right now is just intentionality, right? That, and that's what I mean, like being on purpose, right? You know, I like that phrase. I use it all the time in my poetry class, right? I mean, my one of my trademark, you know, phrases that the kids will eventually come to make fun of me about is like, poetry is on purpose, right? There's a design here, and you might disagree with the design, or you might not dig the design, but it is designed, right? And so it's worthy of our study and our attention, because we can kind of get into the inner workings of the design. And yet we want to not, we don't want to be burdened by this notion of design. And I think that design, you too, right, have to be on purpose, right? And look at the connection between purpose and meaning. You know, if we largely talk about sort of floundering in the meaning crisis right now, which I basically agree we do culturally, at scale, we are unaware, we are ignorant of what we are for at the sort of the most base level. If you're not going to, again, to use the idiom of this conversation, if you're not going to dress on purpose, right, then you're not going to find a meaningful reality. Right. And so, I'm not saying like throwing a necktie and everything's going to be, hunky dory. And I know you're not saying that.
No, but it's about directionality. This is why snipping and snapping at what someone's wearing is absolutely low spirit, myopic stuff. Meaning someone dresses decent. I mean, someone's making an effort. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's convicting. That's convicting to me. I love that.
Yeah, when guys start when someone starts dressing decently and then someone sort of snips and snaps at it. No, you're missing the point. That's myopic to snip and snap, because it's about intentionality. It's about direction. It's about the bigger purpose. When someone, you see what I'm saying? It's about outwardly dumping on that. Don't do that. And when I see people do that, that's a sign of myopia, because they're not seeing the bigger purpose. It's about direction. When someone is on the good path, encourage them, because it's so much easier to fall to the bad path. And so whenever I see a guy that starts dressing well, it's just encouragement. Keep going. My mom used to say something that I really love. Whenever we get in trouble, we'd say, "I didn't mean to," and she'd say, "But you didn't mean not to." And
right.
Good. I say to my kids now.
And I love it. No, I'm going to steal that one. That's a good one.
It's right in line with what you're saying. Yeah. That you didn't mean not to, and it is about direction. It's people. All of these ideas, like I said, they seem like they're conflicting, but they're not. They're just. It's a complex relationship, and we're talking about man representing himself with dignity. It's a reaffirmation of himself in modernity and dignity, that he is not a slave to the machine. He's not a slave to the casino, that he has inherent dignity. There is a religious message to that. It's also about representing who he is to the outside world. It's about representing his story to the outside world, and also representing his culture and his history. It is dressing in a way that represents you in strength, in your culture, in your history and strength, is a direct refutation and rejection of the globalized, synthetic, anti-human, imaginary future.
That's it. That's exactly right. No, amen. So so if we're going to do our second hour plus, I would be like, all right, now we're going to spend the next the next hour talking about why salvage, because I think there's such a brilliant nugget of wisdom in your handle itself, because I agree. I think we are in salvage work.
Yes.
In many different arenas.
Let's do a second hour some other time. Let's do another episode, and we'll cover the next part.
I would love it.
Let's do another.
I love it. So next episode we go full salvage.
Let's do it. Let's go full salvage next episode. I love it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for paying attention. I hope I want one of my pinky swears with my guests and my audience is that I don't want to bore you and I don't want to waste your time. Hopefully, you enjoyed our meanderings through what fashion means, right? And as we should remember that fashion means to make. Right. And therefore, what world are we making? Well, we can even start even in the most sort of rudimentary, what shirt am I going to iron this morning? Right. I mean, I think I can get to that. So, guys, you can check out OW's work on Substack. on Twitter, on Instagram, and I think what is it, necktiesalvage.com is your main landing page, but you've got a bunch of different things. And
Patreon, Substack, Instagram,
Patreon as well. That's right. So please,
find it all there.
Please,
if you want to
hit
support
OW.
the work, for sure, I've got a lot of content out there.
Yeah, so thank you. Seriously, OW. This has been great. I could go more, but hey, other things call. So
we'll go more next time.
Sounds good. All right, take care, man.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye. All right. So yes, I'm going to say it's just